It's great to have you with us again. I trust you had a good weekend. We're thankful for the Lord's blessing, even through live stream and other ways of connecting. We're just seeing the Lord work, and I trust the Lord is working in your heart. I want to encourage us in these days to have the right attitude. Now, many of us are concerned about what we're seeing in the decisions that are being made by the authorities over us. We're concerned about religious liberty. We definitely should be. We are concerned about the issues regarding just authoritarianism in a democracy. We also see the tendency here, more than a tendency, the huge move towards socialism in our country. And this has been something well before this pandemic came into play, but it's now coming out in some of the decisions that are being made. And with these very real concerns can come a bad attitude toward authority. Now, we need to do what we ought to do to keep our values in place in America. But when we're at a time like this, it doesn't do us any good spiritually to chafe and to have a rebellious spirit in our heart or to be overly negative in what we say. Now, we can talk honestly about our concerns, but there's that spirit. And then what happens is, if we have a frustrated and a non-submissive spirit, even about legitimate things, it hurts us spiritually. It's not good for our children. It's not good for those around us. If we talk inappropriately, it's not good for our testimony to people that are unsaved because they're frustrated also. And so I just wanted to give you a couple of verses. We know them from Romans chapter 13. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. I know what you're thinking. Well, I know it's what the Bible says, but I think of some of the different scenarios that we see in our country. How can that be ordained of God? Well, you've got to put yourself in the sandals of the Apostle Paul when he wrote this under inspiration. It was Nero, that satanically controlled emperor, insane, who was in power at that time. And yet the Apostle Paul understood the matter of biblical authority. He realized that he could trust God to use even the irrational behavior of an emperor to further the work of God. We have seen throughout the ages, even persecution has fueled the fires of Christianity. And Now, never do we like that, nor should we want it, because 1 Timothy chapter 2 says we should pray for peace. We should pray for the opportunity for the gospel to go forward unhindered. So that is definitely the right way to pray. But we've got to trust in the sovereign wisdom of our God. You go down in this passage and it says in verse 4, for he, speaking of the ruler, is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God. Verse 5, wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. These are very helpful verses, especially in the context of what Paul was going through. And so we need to believe in the sovereignty of God. Now, we need to be walking by faith. That's going to change the equation. But at the same time, we need to know that God is over all, and he is working through this crisis and even through the issues that are going on in our country. I believe God is waking up our country because of the downward decline morally and biblically in our country. We're so humanistic now and so pagan. But we need to know that God takes all these different things and he can further the Great Commission if we will trust him. And so we've got to believe that rulers are a minister of God for good. We need to thank God for the good things that we see in our national leadership. And we need to trust even on our state and local leadership. But I just want to encourage you today, live with peace, live with trust in your heart. Know that God is on the throne. Don't let yourself get frustrated and carnal when you hear things and feel so confined. Whether they've done right or not, that's up to God. We need to obey. We need to have the right kind of spirit. We need to pray that we will not allow this to be a hurtful situation in the future for our country, but we need to trust God right now. So I encourage you today, let's be happy in the Lord. Let's have a full faith that God knows what he's doing and he is our God, and let's trust him with all of our heart.